What's up, everybody? Welcome into the 24/7 Sports College Basketball Show. I'm Adam Finkelstein. I'm here with Isaac Trotter, and today is a very special day because after 30 days, the transfer portal will close at 11:59 tonight. And it depends on where you are. If you're on the East Coast, it closes at East Coast time. If you're the West Coast, it closes at Pacific time. Doesn't make very much sense to me, but you got to get your paperwork in before the clock strikes midnight. That is the moral of the story. Isaac Trotter, what are the big headlines that you were keeping an eye out for here tonight?
Hey, let's just see how many teams can hold on to their starters, right? Like, we only have a few more hours left of the portal open. Coaches have been stressed about this for longer than just the 30 days that the window have been open. Retention wins national championships. The teams that are able to keep their best players out of the portal till it absolutely closes tonight will be set up for success next winter.
I also want to welcome in our big-time newsbreakers. I like to call him the czar of the transfer portal. Here's Travis Branham. Trav, what are you looking for tonight as the hours tick down here? We're under 24. What do you have your eyes out for?
Well, it's the biggest question is obviously who is going to be hitting the transfer portal over the last 24 hours. All the players, for the most part, that have been hitting are guys with no eligibility left. It was the question of the day. My phone was blowing up with coaches and agents, everybody asking, why are these players entering the transfer portal? When, frankly, the question, in my opinion, should be, why is the NCAA allowing these players to enter the transfer portal? So there's going to be a lot of noise, I think, around that today. And for the most part, I think it's going to be a pretty quiet day. There will be a couple big names I expect to pop, but as compared to like last year and years prior, with the players in the NBA draft and everything, most of those guys have already declared their intentions to enter the transfer portal. So I think it's going to be a fairly quiet day.
All right, now let me say this. A couple guys who've declared for the draft who have not, as of yet, put their name in the portal that I'm looking out for. Boogie Fland, Tahad Pettiford, Milos Uzan. Do we see any of those guys going to the market just to keep their options open from a negotiation standpoint? But I tell you what, what do you got, Trav?
Yeah, I'm absolutely keeping my eye out on those. I mean, obviously, throughout the course of these last 4 weeks, you do hear names like some of those that you just mentioned that could entertain and enter the transfer portal. However, things have gone pretty quiet. So definitely going to be digging and making my phone calls throughout the day and figuring out if one of those names you just mentioned will be hitting the portal.
All right, and we are going to be on the air for the better part of the next 2 hours, so we will be able to bring you the breaking news as it happens right here live on the 24/7 Sports College Basketball Show. But here's a quick look at what you can expect over the course of this extended show. You can see we're going to break down all of the top players and the top classes in the portal. You're going to get every bit of information here. We're also going to give you the intel on the top uncommitted players. Again, as the news happens, Trav's going to be working the phones all day long. You are going to be getting live minute-by-minute updates right here on the show. Then Eric Bossi is going to join us. We're going to talk about scouting some of the mid-major players who are leveling up. Who could be the next Dalton Connect? Who could be the next Mark Sears? We're going to break that down on the show as well. Last but not least, we're going to do a little Stockwatch. The transfer portal has changed the fate of some teams, some players in recent years. We're going to forecast what is going to come in the next 12 months. That is coming all up here on the 24/7 Sports College Basketball Show. But you know what time it is, folks. There is promos to be had. If you were checking this show out, you were going to want to make sure that you log on to that 24/7 Sports site as soon as this show is over. You're going to find all you need there. And remember, the portal code there is literally portal. You're going to have that as well. So a couple other things to note before we get going here. It's a reminder that we are on the road toward 1 billion show views here on the 24/7 Sports YouTube page. And that is quite an achievement. Thank you so much for supporting what we do here. And in honor of us getting to 1 billion views, we're giving away a yearly VIP subscription. You can win. All you have to do is take a photo of you watching 24/7 Sports on YouTube and then share it under the hashtag Road to 1 billion. That's it. An immediate family, they are eligible. So all my aunts and my mom watching this, get that phone out. Don't just send it to me. Get it on there. You can win. Reminder, use the hashtag 24/7 transfer portal on X, Twitter, to submit your questions. We're going to be answering those throughout the course of the show as well. But let's start right here. let's talk Portal 101. For those people who are not in the weeds like we are all season long, Trotter, let's break this down. This is day 30. It is a 30-day window of what I think we can just summarize is free agency in college basketball.
Yeah, this is also one of the biggest and craziest free agency periods of the college basketball era, right? There's more money than ever before. There's talks of $10 million rosters or even north of that. You know, there's guys hitting the portal being able to make a lot more money than they could in the NBA in college basketball next year. So this is an unprecedented cycle. We've had over 2,000 players enter the transfer portal, and I think this is a good class. I think there's a little bit of like nuance about that, if it's a great class or if it's a good class. I think this is a really good transfer portal class. If you need to build a contender via the portal, there are guys that you can do, but it's going to be really, really expensive because the money is just overwhelming this year, especially.
Yeah, it truly is. I think it was Trav who made this point. We've seen the market essentially double in each of the last 2 years. So the prices that we saw last year, they've doubled this year, and we saw that again 2 years ago from going into last season as well. So it's going to be interesting to see if that repeats itself. Just want to emphasize some of the basics here. This is day 30. After today, no player can leave their respective program. You have to fill that paperwork out by 11:59 local time tonight, and that is the importance of today. It doesn't mean players can't commit after today, so there's still going to be plenty of commitments to be had, but it means we are going to know who exactly is available. The only exception is if there is a coaching change. If there is a coaching change coming up this spring or summer, players are then allowed to go into the portal. But what's different from last year, grad transfers, they're done. They are done after this. So after tonight at midnight, we should theoretically know every player that's available to be on a college basketball roster next season. Of course, there will be some international prospects that come in as well. But that's the general gist of the importance of today.
Yeah, and there'll be a little bit of a trickle down for the next couple days, right? You could text the person that you want just to have something like legit. You're texting your compliance person, basically saying, hey, I want to enter the portal. Maybe that takes, a little bit of time. So we'll see some news maybe tomorrow of certain names. But for the most part, like, you've had 30 days to make this decision. We also had the portal window opened a week later than the previous cycle. Like, there's been enough time. So I think a lot of these decisions have been made for the most part. It's just, again, you're just trying to keep your guys right now because the money for some of these teams may be desperate in the portal cycle who have a little bit of extra money in free agency, a little cap space, so to speak. They're really like pressuring behind the scenes. Of course, not legally, right? But they're pressuring behind the scenes to try to get certain guys into the portal because they could be potential game changers for their teams.
All right, now let's get into the money because obviously NIL is the name of the game right now. And this has been an evolution over the course of the last few years. It has completely changed the landscape, the scope of college basketball roster construction. For people who don't follow the sport 12 months a year, who are saying, what do you mean money? Like, let's give them a 30,000-foot view of where we are right now in terms of how you build rosters in college basketball, specifically at the high major level.
Well, to be honest, NIL has never been NIL. Right now, it's
Exactly.
pay for play, right? And
Yep.
that's kind of been the adjustment period for a lot of these teams. And you're able to double dip. You have the revenue sharing money that you're able to get, and you're also able to have that pay for play type of money that you've raised through your boosters in order to build a roster right now. So I think that's why you've seen some of these rosters, their salaries kind of double with what they can do, the cap space that they have. So it's a fascinating type of area and landscape of college basketball that we're in. We'll be curious to see too, like the pressure that some of these teams have. Like, hey, we have a $10 million roster. Can we win? What does Moneyball look like for the teams that don't? That's also underrated part about this. Like, there's great money for teams even in the A10 or the Missouri Valley has some money, or the Mountain West has some money now. Like, those teams have $3 million compared to the past where they had nothing.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So I think the underlining point here is you have to have money. Money is not a guarantee that you're going to be good, but it is a requisite to be competitive. We've seen that. It's not necessarily to say the teams with the most money are going to be the best, but it certainly helps. And we're going to get into that over the course of the show, exactly how much money we're talking about here. But let's talk about the connection from a calendar standpoint between the rise of what is deemed NIL and what is, in all practical purposes, pay for play, and the transfer portal. Because it used to be that you could go in the portal and you had to sit out a year. That was waived, and then it was, okay, you can transfer once, you can play right away, but after that you have to sit out a year. That's now gone. So now it's literally free agency every year where guys can go in, and girls in the women's game, of course, and you are just it's just open bidding. It's open bidding. So talk to me about that, how that has evolved, and how it has just turned college basketball into something that's really totally unprecedented.
Yeah, like I joked with somebody, it's like if I see an "I'm back" meme, right? Like the graphic that gets made or whatever, like, hey, I'm definitely coming back, or they post whatever gift they want on Twitter or X or Instagram. I don't believe it, right? Like, it's hard to believe those things until it's set in stone. And there's multiple examples of it in this portal cycle where a guy will post, hey, I'm coming back. But, like, that's just not the reality of it when they find out what different the numbers are. Oh, like, this school can triple what I'm making right now, quadruple, 5 times, whatever. Like, it makes sense logistically to hit the portal. But everybody is a free agent. I think that has made it hard for roster building moving forward. It's like, hey, like, those days of a 4-year plan are over. It's a 1-year plan. And it's a 1-year rebuild, and you try to build a bite at the apple. Give yourself a bite at the apple with the roster that you put together, and you kind of go from there because you're not going to have guys that you could for sure lock in for 2, 3, 4 years, unfortunately.
I think that is a critical point right there because we've seen championship caliber programs, both in conference and nationals, built on the basis of developing from within. Some people are still doing that. UConn's still committed to that. Won 2 of the last 3 national championships. Marquette still committed to that. They're using a lot of their resources not to attract new players, but to retain their current players. We're going to talk about that more. But the prospects of building from within and developing freshman, sophomore, junior, and having that growth each and every year, you not only need to have the resources to retain players, but you need to convince those players that this is the best opportunity for them. And that is a tricky, tricky business. You don't see a whole lot of that in college basketball anymore. So it really has changed the game. I think the other thing it's done, it's shortened the runways. You think about some of the teams that were good this year, so many of them had first-year head coaches, guys that could immediately flip a program. That didn't used to be the case, but it's the case now because you can just go into the portal, aka free agency, and you can rebuild your roster right away. When that happens, there is no rebuild. It's reloading. And so I think that has allowed some of these teams with big budgets to literally flip from one season to the next. The other thing it's done is it's created an expectation to win right now for the coaches with those resources. And if you don't win right now, because remember, for all intents and purposes, you may work for the university, but in reality, you're working for everybody who has given you money to go out and build a roster. And that's why I think we see less job security than ever before. So there's all these new dynamics that are starting to impact the way the portal is going. Let's talk a little bit about the calendar, because as we said, this is day 30 of the portal, which means that the portal opened in the middle of the NCAA tournament. Now, there was a lot of talk about how that was a disadvantage for the team still competing. Tom Izzo spoke about that on the podium at the NCAA tournament, said, I'm not going to do my players the injustice of worrying about next year's roster until this year's season is over. So talk to me about the evolution of the calendar and how that's worked in conjunction with the timing of the NCAA tournament.
No, it's super funny because I'm in San Antonio for the Final Four. I'm talking to Stephen Pearl, the associate head coach for Auburn, and he's kind of breaking down the Florida game before the game, and then he goes, yeah, by the way, we have 3 Zoom calls with transfers this weekend in the hotel. Like, they're going to get done with their game prep for the Final Four and head to go make that pitch. And some people think that's a benefit, right? Like, hey, we're at the Final Four. You want to come play here? You're like, no one else who's recruiting you is at the Final Four like we are. But it's also just another aspect of work. And I think it just really prioritizes or hammers home the point that scouting the transfer portal does not start when it opens. It starts months in advance. And that is the teams that are most successful are doing work on guys that could potentially get in the portal, trying to find out that intel, that pre-portal work for multiple weeks before the transfer portal opens so that when it does, you're prepared to go try to make a real run at the guys that fit the positions that you really, really need.
Okay, so to your point, as roster construction has changed, so too has the way that you build out your staffs. And the title that we are hearing most frequently now is this position of general manager. And it's meant to mimic what we see in the NBA, or it's trending that way. I think 3 years ago, people hired general managers and gave them that label, but sometimes that position in terms of daily responsibilities wasn't all that different from things that have already been done. It was kind of like, I don't want to say it was a show, but it was like, hey, look how forward thinking we are. We have a general manager. And yet that general manager was acting as maybe just another member of the support staff. Now, places like North Carolina, places like Cincinnati, places like NC State, places like Pittsburgh, you could go on and on and on. Villanova's had one for a while. Rachel Baker at Duke, I think, is one of the very best. But there are GMs that are becoming closer and closer to what we see in professional sports. And their job, they may not be the boss of the coach like we see in professional sports, but in many cases, and with increasing frequency, their job is to worry about roster construction 12 months per year, so that when you're playing in the NCAA tournament and the portal opens, the coaches who are preparing for a Sweet 16 game aren't simultaneously saying, well, I need to do what Stephen Pearl did and also schedule 3 Zoom calls. So talk to me about the growth of the GM position and how we've seen staffs evolve, and maybe by extension, how you think they could evolve.
Yeah, I think that it's not going to be crazy for one day that we're going to have like a front office that's kind of like the NBA for college basketball. Where
I think that's here.
Yeah, like 8, 9, 10, 11 staffers. I think BYU is really ahead of the curve with stuff like that.
Yeah, I should have mentioned them. Sure.
Texas Tech is ahead of the curve with stuff like that, with how they scout the transfer portal. Kellen Buffington does a terrific job there as the general manager down there. So I think that is certainly the era. It is. I think the best point you made though is that in the NBA,
the general points.
You make lots of great points. In the NBA, the general manager works ahead of the coach.
Right.
In college, the general manager works for the coach.
Right.
And so like that, I think, could we see a position where some coaches move to a general manager role? Maybe. I don't think that's crazy.
We're not there yet, though.
Yeah. But I don't think that's insane in 5, 6, 7 years or something like that could theoretically happen. But yeah, if you're not transfer portal scouting well in advance of the portal, you're behind, because a lot of your peers, a lot of the teams that you're going to be competing against next March have been doing the work for a while.
All right. So I have been told, because we've talked about a lot of the GMs who are forward thinking or empowered to be forward thinking and build their roster 12 months per year. And I think a lot of that has to do with scouting, whether it's internationally, whether it's current college players through programs like Synergy and tools like that where you're watching film. But I've heard of at least one staff now that has a GM and is hiring 4 full-time scouts to scout the world year-round. Because here's the other thing. With the amount of money that's going on in college basketball right now, there's a lot of 18 to 24-year-olds who now think it makes a whole lot more sense financially to play college basketball than it does to play professional basketball in Europe or other parts of the world. So that's one of the reasons why you are seeing a greater influx of international talent into the college basketball ranks, because they pay better than anywhere else. That's where we're at right now, folks. They don't really care if they've got to go to physics class because they'll probably just take it online. I'm sure that's not the case everywhere, but that's where we're at. So one staff that I know of, GM, 4 full-time people, scouting year-round. And how I think that's the exception, not the norm right now. But what's your perception of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it depends for a lot of different staffs. Like I've heard of opportunities where it's like even lower level staffers or guys trying to get into the business. It's like, hey, your job to watch the Mountain West, or like, hey, you're scouting this league, or hey, you're scouting the, all of those things. Like every player is like being scouted, and every game matters. Every time you can put something on tape matters. And those staffs that split it up, like, hey, maybe it feels eerily similar to the NBA where it's like, oh, you're an East Coast guy, you take care of the Midwest, you take care of the West Coast. Like that's happening for a lot of college basketball staffs, and this is just the beginning. All right, so that's essentially where we are at right now in terms of how rosters are being built in college basketball. But let's get to the players themselves. Let's talk about who is ranked in the 24/7 Sports rankings, which you, Eric Bossi, Travis Branham, are putting together those lists. So if you're mad at rankings, don't come at me now. High school guys, draft guys, that's my bad. But this list, you yell at Trotter, you yell at Branham, yell at Bossi. Trotter, tell me about the number 1 player in our 24/7 Sports transfer portal
player ranking.
Yeah, it's Yaxel Lindenborg from UAB, and he is one of the elite prospects in this portal class. He can pass, he can dribble, he can shoot. He had one of the best stat lines I've ever seen. He had 30 points, 20 rebounds, 8 assists, 4 blocks, and 5 steals against East Carolina. I did not see a game from any player this year that was more impressive than that one. He was outstanding. I think he is a guy that has a chance to be a major difference maker. The real question is, will he play college basketball next year? He's so good on both ends of the floor, especially defensively. Like, he could easily be a first-round pick in the NBA draft. He's going through that process right now. He has until May 28th to make that decision if he wants to exit from the NBA draft and come back to college basketball. And if he does, he's going to play for Michigan. And Dusty May did a terrific job of getting ahead of that curve early, getting him on board. It took a big NIL offer to get that one done. But if he plays college basketball next year, I think he can be a first-team all-league guy with all-American potential in any league in America, but in the Big Ten next season.
Now, the theme of weighing the NBA draft versus the portal is one you were going to hear throughout the course of this show, because as programs look for the best players on a one-year basis across the globe, players are also looking for the best scenario. And because the college dollars have increased so much, sometimes even if you're a first-round pick, you will make more money by staying in college. That leads me to my next point. One of the players I want to talk about, a top 10 player in this class, just finished his freshman year at Baylor, and he is going to head to BYU next year. I said if we had redid last year's rankings, Rob Wright would have finished in the top 20 of the national class of 2024. The consummate point guard, and he has been that for a long, long time. We saw him be the floor general of a Montverde Academy team that was perfect 2 seasons ago in high school basketball, a product of the team final EYBL program as well. This guy has always been a complete maestro, the ultimate floor general. You pick your descriptive. The bottom line is he a throwback point guard. But I'll tell you the areas this year at Baylor which really impressed me with Rob Wright. First of all, the shooting. The shooting, he was 44% on open catch-and-shoot threes. And that was always, for somebody who's not the biggest, not the most athletic, you've got to be a knockdown shooter. I don't know that he was a knockdown shooter in high school. I think he is a knockdown shooter now. The second area that we saw just really significant growth was the overall creativity. Being able to play with the ball in his hands and come up with creative solutions, whether that was in pick and roll or in isolations. Baylor was decimated by injury all season long, and yet this guy came into the starting lineup. They moved Jeremy Roach to the bench, and he really took over, and I think he's going to be terrific at BYU. I think he's going to make the game so much easier for A.J. Debonsa. A.J. Debonsa, now the number 2 ranked prospect in high school basketball, but was number 1 for a long time, committed to BYU on a pretty significant NIL deal. But Rob Wright's going to make Rob Wright's presence going to make the game a lot easier for AJ.
And when we talk about like self-scouting, that's also a super important part of transfer portal scouting. And BYU was like, we need a paint touch guard. So they go into the portal and get maybe the best paint touch guard. Now, it did not come without controversy, right? Like, there were a lot of reports of Rob Wright had signed a deal with Baylor. Then that changed where now BYU could come in and double, maybe even triple the type of money that he could get to head over there. But from a pure basketball fit perspective-wise, I think it's a slam dunk for both sides. I think BYU is going to be very happy with Rob Wright as their starting point guard. I think Rob Wright's going to be really, really poised to succeed there. NBA system, I would expect a lot of pick and rolls. He can throw beautiful lobs to Kebaketa and Xavier Stanton, the freshmen that they're getting in there. They have great shooting in there, Richie Saunders. And you think about big threes in college basketball. Next year, you look at Rob Wright, A.J. Debonsa, Richie Saunders. That's a big three that can go toe-to-toe with absolutely anybody in college basketball. I think BYU is a major, major player, and it's not just because of money. They also found a way to scout the portal and scout themselves. Hey, what's wrong with our team? How can we fix it? And go find someone who can plug that huge, huge hole as a paint touch guard.
It's not just because of money, but money is a big part of it. Kevin Young, if you've watched this show, 24/7 Sports college basketball show, he was on the show, spoke very candidly about when we talk about resources, it's not just NIL, and that is pretty close to a direct quote, talking about all the things that he was able to bring into his program. Let's talk about 2 other guys, and let's go beyond the top 10. Let's go 11 through 20, and these are players who are already committed, who you think are just particularly good fits. Who's your pick 11 to 20?
Yeah, like for me, I love what Jacoby Gillespie has done. I think that this is a guy that really wanted to go to Tennessee. And he's a Tennessee native, and he's from that area. And the ability to finally get to go there now after spending a couple years at Belmont and a year at Maryland, I think Tennessee crushed it, finding one of the best transfer guards in the country. He's competitive. He can really shoot the three. He's one of 4 guards in college basketball last year who made more than 83s and also had an assist rate over 27. Like that puts him in rare air. He can really play pick and rolls. He's going to make Nate Ament's life so much easier as just a vet who's been there and done that. And he's really good in late game scenarios. I know that everybody's going to think of like that Michigan State game where he shot that deep 3 that led to the Trey Holloman buzzer beater, which was one of the best games of the season. That was like the rarity if you watched him all year. He was great in late games all year, just getting to the rim, getting paint touches, making off the dribble threes, like making the right reads. I just feel like Tennessee crushed it in the portal with him, and he's just like the perfect fit for what Rick Barnes wants to do at point guard. And I have a lot of respect for Zakai Ziegler. But I think Tennessee's point guard room got more talented by adding Jacoby Gillespie.
Zakai Ziegler slander will not be accepted on this show. We're going to need to get him out of here because Zakai Ziegler slander will not be accepted on this show. In all seriousness, I do have a question. Well, I'm going to start with a statement, naturally, and then that'll lead to a question. I think the question from Belmont when he got to Maryland last year is the lack of size and athleticism going to translate? I think the reason he answered that is because the shooting was so exceptional. And it was the versatility of the shot making too. I mean, I think it's 48% open catch and shoot threes and then 38% threes off the dribble. And so what that tells you is this is a guy who has supreme gravity shooting off the catch. And what that means is if he's spotting up, his defender is hugged up right to him, opening the lane up for everybody else to go make plays. And he can also be a tough shot maker off the dribble. Give it to him in late shot clock situations. He can make shots. He can play make for others. And then on top of that, I think he was even a little bit better defensively than people thought. He had a really high steal rate, and he was very good at the point of attack. I do not know that he's as good at the point of attack as Zakai Ziegler is. We can fight about that later. But I also think that it was a little bit of a different situation at Maryland because Rodney Rice had that breakout year. All eyes were on Derek Queen. And at the beginning of the year, people were talking about Julian Reese too. So people came into the season talking about Maryland's front court. Now at Tennessee next year, they haven't plugged that Dalton Connect Chaz Lanier hole yet. So who's the running mate next to him? There's a whole lot of pressure on Nate Ament to go in there. I mean, they're selling the Kevin Durant vision that was 15 years ago at Texas. That's tough. So I think the challenge for Gillespie, and I'm not doubting him because everything you said is true, but he's at the top line of the scouting report right now. So it's going to be interesting to see how Tennessee builds out the rest of their roster. I think the front court is done, but they've got to get a backcourt running mate. And like I said, fill that Chaz Lanier Dalton Connect hole.
And at this point, it's not cheap to find somebody like that. Like, it's not going to be cheap. But, I think with Gillespie, the thing I go back to, he's a football player. Like, he is super, super athletic. He is up to the task, competitive. And I think he's just poised to be a really, really successful point guard. And, I think the other thing, too, is everyone talked about, small point guards, like, that's a problem. In the SEC last year, did you know that 13 of the 16 SEC teams had a point guard that was 6'1" or shorter?
I did not know that.
That's I just don't think it's that big of a concern. Even though the athleticism is real, if you can make a bunch of shots off the dribble, and if you can get into that mid-range game and have that float game down, like, you're going to have it. Gillespie is excellent at both of those areas. I think he's going to be one of the best point guards in the SEC next season.
All right. Well, we'll certainly see. My pick, 11 through 20, the fit I like the best is Josh Dix to Creighton. Josh Dix is a prolific shot maker. We're talking about 40% plus in each of the last 3 seasons at Iowa. You see off the movement, deep threes like that when the game's on the line. But more than that, 51% on unguarded catch and shoot threes. So when it comes to gravity as a floor spacer, opening the lane up for your teammates, nobody is better than Josh Dix. And with Mac over there and that playbook, Greg McDermott, that is a big-time weapon that he can harness. And I think there's going to be an additional level of creativity. You're going to see Josh Dix be able to be utilized in terms of the playbook. And I think that's going to be really fascinating. I'll make this point about him as well. He's not just one-dimensional. He's a guy who uses his size, is very adept at scoring over smaller players. Now, I'm not sure how much those middies are going to be allowed at Creighton. We'll have to see. But then he's a really good finisher, too. I mean, you may not see him on a highlight reel, but this guy was 67% at the rim last year. That's 91st percentile in all of college basketball. On top of that, I think he's a little stiff, but he's a good defender. You and I had that conversation offline about, whether or not he's a plus defender, but what's your impression of what he could be at Creighton next year?
Yeah, I think everybody wants to talk about like, oh, I want to be a 3-level scorer, or we need a 3-level scorer, or he is a 3-level scorer. Like Josh Dix actually is one. Like mid-range jumpers are a good, efficient shot when Josh Dix takes them because he's over 52% on those mid-range pull-up jumpers. I think he is poised to be a terrific, like 15, 16, 17 points a game in that system at Creighton. And I'm with you. I think there is some questions about what he is defensively. Iowa did not have a good defense with Josh Dix on that team. But I do think that there are possessions that you can talk yourself into. Now, I think some of the supporting cast is more my question with how good is it going to be. Like Nick Graves, the transfer out of Charlotte, I thought that was a decent move. Owen Freeman, we might have to bring him up a little bit later.
We're going to get into this more.
Yeah,
we're only 18 minutes in. I didn't say I loved the whole roster. I just said I like Josh Dix.
No, I agree with you because I think that Josh Dix, Jackson McAndrew, like Nick Graves, like all three of those guys can really shoot the cover off the ball from three. Like even in a year where there are going to be a lot of changes at Creighton, I have a feeling that this is going to be a top 15 to top 20 offense nationally.
Offense, yes. We'll talk about the defense later. All right, let's talk now. Some of the, I guess we could call them sleepers, guys who are in the 20s, 21 to 30. Take a look at it here. Chad Baker-Mazzara, he went to high school with me. We both graduated in 99. He's still available. Mustafa Cham, Jason Sannon, Wesley Yates, Rodney Rice just committed to USC moments ago. Morris Johnson, he's headed to Michigan. And we've got Henry Visar, who you're going to talk about, and you see the rest of the top 30 there. I want to talk about Mustafa Cham because he is my pick as someone who, as I said, blame you, blame Bossi, blame Branham. Those are your rankings. I think Cham, when it comes to who is the best NBA prospects in this group, give me the big fella. 7'2", high-level athlete, rim runner, shot blocker, lob threat. This is how much of a shot blocker he is. 2.6 blocks last year at Central Florida. I think he's got big-time rim protection, and he can also slide his feet a little bit. So he's not just like the drop coverage monster who can protect the rim by sitting out in the lane. He can do different things for you defensively. And then one of the things that was a surprise this year at UCF, the fact that he took over 2 threes per game. Now, he only made 29%, so I'm not sure that he's going to be given that same latitude at Cincinnati. But I think the willingness to take it and the potential to develop that area of his game opens up a new level to his upside that is translatable to the highest levels of this game. I think he's going to be huge next year, no pun intended, for Cincinnati. And I think he is a very legitimate NBA draft pick who would have gotten looks this year, probably in the second round, had he decided to declare.
I mean, he's a two-way monster. He really is. I think he can be a complete difference maker on both ends of the floor. I'm curious about that backcourt at Cincinnati, like a Kerr Kriisa, Sincere Harris, Day Thomas, Jizzle James. That's an interesting quartet there that they're going to rock out together with Wes Miller. But terrific recruiting class. You throw in a guy like this, a complete difference maker like this. This also brings up another little angle of it. There are package deals in the transfer portal, and Cham is a package deal with the assistant coaches that he is going to bring over to Cincinnati. So in the transfer portal, it's not just one guy anymore. It's sometimes a guy and someone else you have to take care of.
And that, too, is another theme that we are going to talk more about as the show goes on, because one of the subplots when it's just about who has the most resources, who has the most buying power, is when you have to make more with less. How do you do that? Sometimes it's an old-fashioned trick, but sometimes finding a coach who can bring a player with him is a way you help to make up for that resource gap. That's something that Cincinnati did. That's something that Oklahoma did. We will talk more about that as the show goes on. But your player, 21 to 30, that you think is a particularly good fit is who?
I love Henry Visar. You know, the big man out of Arizona who is transferring to UNC. And when he was on the floor against top 100 teams, opponents shot just 51% against Arizona. He's a big-time rim protector. He can pass it. He can shoot it from three. You saw that floor stretching. Just putting him in the lineup really weaponized that Arizona group. Offensively, that was a team that was pretty close to making the Elite Eight. They gave Duke a real run for its money in the Sweet 16. So I think Visar to UNC has a chance for superstar potential as a two-way guy as well. And just like what they needed, like this is the piece they absolutely needed needed after last year where they were a little bit undersized in that front court. And now you look at it like, a big storyline today is, does Drake Powell put his name in the NBA draft? But if they can get Drake Powell back, they have Henry Visar at the rim, and they have Seth Trimble at the point of attack. Those are three.
Don't forget about my guy.
Which one?
Don't forget about my guy, Jaren Stevenson. They finally got a 4 who can shoot.
I was more bringing up 3 defensive aces at 3 different positions, like 3 different levels of the floor. UNC's defense was not very good last year. With Henry Visar, they could be very good, and their offense could be very good. Their offense could be very good if Jaren Stevenson makes his threes.
That's true. That's true. Here's my thing about Visar. Put on 30-plus pounds of muscle last year at Arizona, and I think that improved physicality allowed him to pressure the rim at an unprecedented rate. He too is a big man who can shoot it a little bit, and so a lot of people talk about that. But his percentage at 2-point field goal was 70%. He makes everything at the rim. He's got good hands. He's got good footwork. He can pass, so you can play him in different actions. You can play him out of high-low. You can play him out of dribble handoffs, and he's just huge. I know he doesn't measure great in terms of his overall wingspan, but he's one of those guys who barely needs to get off his feet in order to dunk the ball, and he's massive as a roller, and I think his ability to catch and finish in stride and to catch everything is going to be absolutely huge at North Carolina. It was big at Arizona last year, and I'm with you. I think he is a player who can outperform his ranking. Those are some of the best committed players. But now, this is what everybody wants to hear. Who's still available? Because like we said, you have to put your name in the portal by the end of the day today. You don't have to commit. So we essentially have the group of players who are on the market, and now we're going to talk about the best available. But one of the real interesting trends here is I think 4 of the best players still available have also declared for the NBA draft. So we talked about Yaxel, who is committed to Michigan, but a lot of the guys who declared for the NBA draft have also put their name in the portal and not made decisions yet. Now, I want to share a story before I do this. So NCAA tournament, Hunter Dickinson, Kansas center, also doubled as a CBS Sports HQ anchor. He and I were in studio together a number of times over March Madness. And he said on air, and I thought it was such a good point, he says, all the players talk, all the agents, understand the market norms now. And if you declare for the NBA draft, you better put your name in the transfer portal, because if not, you have no negotiation leverage if you decide to come back to college basketball. It's just between you and the school you were already at, and maybe if they already allocated their funds, you're not going to get as much money as you think. So sometimes while these players are exploring the NBA draft, they are putting their name in the portal just to maximize their options should they decide to come back to college basketball. I share this story because that context is relevant for 4 of the 4 best players that are still on the board here. I'm going to ask you to go first. PJ Haggerty from Memphis. You've got him number 2 right now in the 24/7 Sports portal rankings.
Yeah, this was an interesting debate that we had at number 1 because Yaxel Lendeborg and PJ Haggerty famously played in the same conference. Who was player of the year in that league? PJ Haggerty. Who's number 1 in our transfer portal rankings? Yaxel Lendeborg. So it's a little bit of a fight that we had, but I think that Haggerty, the scoring in transition, I think he's a plug-and-play 18 points a game next year, regardless of where he plays. He was 21 points a game 2 years ago. He was 21 points a game last year. Transfer up even more. I think he's got a chance to be one of the leading scorers in that respective league. He can really, really get to the free throw line. Awesome in transition. Added more of a three-point threat to his game. He's commanding a huge market, and the numbers are $4 million, right? Like that you could potentially, he wants right now in the open market in free agency, and that kind of limits it, right? Like it's like, okay, who's open, who has an open spot, and who has open, cap space for that? So I would look at a team like Ole Miss. I also don't think that going back to Memphis is completely off the table. That feels like a spot that could potentially be in play. Obviously the NBA draft is as well, and like we said earlier, May 28th is the deadline for those guys that entered the NBA draft to withdraw and maintain their NCAA eligibility. I would expect PJ Haggerty to play college basketball next year, but I do not know where it's going to be yet.
Here's my question about PJ Haggerty: can he defend? Because if you're getting paid $4 million. You better be able to impact the game on both ends of the floor and not be a negative on the defensive end. And then how does he adapt if he is not the primary option offensively? Because this is a guy who's now played at 3 schools in 3 years. He's averaged over 21 points per game now, 2 consecutive years, 2 different schools. We know he can score. We know he made a significant jump with his three-point shooting last year. I thought that was critical. What we don't know is if he can defend, and what we don't know is how he will react to having less volume and usage if he goes somewhere where maybe he's not option 1A.
Yeah, and also the other question is like, how good of a team are we if PJ Haggerty's our best player? Like, Memphis, he was their best player this year, and they were a 5 seed in the NCAA tournament, had a great year. But, like, they also had great supporting pieces. Like, Tyrese Hunter was a terrific supporting piece. Dane Danger was awesome. Colby Rogers, a great transfer portal ad out of Wichita State, a great year. Musa Cisse, like, that was a good team. It wasn't just PJ Haggerty put him on your back. So if you're, this is kind of where it goes where some of these smart teams are like, all right, if we're investing $4 million to get PJ Haggerty on our campus, like, what does that mean for our salary cap? What does that mean, like, for the amount that we're able to add to our team? Like, what does our team look like if he's our best player? And it's an onward discussion there. I do think, though, that, like, there's not a lot of bust potential with PJ Haggerty, which is a real factor because we've seen some big busts in the last transfer portal classes just because his playmaking. He's a really, really good playmaker. And when you add that to the shooting as well and the scoring package that he has, I feel like that gives him a really high floor offensively. It's hard to find teams that make a lot of sense for him with the money that he's commanding right now and with the role that he wants, especially when a lot of teams are trying to load up.
One guy that we know will not be going back is R.J. Luis, the reigning Big East Player of the Year, who averaged 18.7 rebounds and 2 assists per game last year for St. John's, but was, of course, sent to the bench down the stretch of that NCAA tournament game against Arkansas. He has put his name in the portal. He is declared for the NBA draft right at the moment. It seems like he is focused on the NBA draft, but if he doesn't get the feedback he wants, like most players in this market, I think he's going to find that he's going to get a better dollar amount in college basketball next season. So it's going to be very interesting. I think he's in a scenario where you get that first-round promise. In the NBA draft, a first-round promise comes with it a promise of a multi-year guaranteed contract. So obviously, even if the one-year salary from college basketball can be higher, because let's face it, if you project as a late first-round pick, right now that's just above $2 million, you're probably getting more to play in college basketball next season. But it is the promise of the additional years and that guaranteed money that could be the difference maker. My thing with RJ is obviously he's a little bit of a throwback. He puts a ton of pressure on the rim. He's great in transition, really hunts the rim even in the half court. Throwback in terms of the way he loves the mid-range game. I mean, we don't see guys curl for mid-range jumpers anymore, but you do with him. The three-point shot is a wild card, and the defense, while he's talented, while he's big, physical, has movement skills, the defense tends to come in correlation to the offense. I think Rick Pitino kind of alluded to that when he continued to be questioned about pulling him in that Arkansas game. What's your take on Luis and whether or not we'll see him in college basketball next season?
Yeah, we haven't really heard a lot of buzz with different teams with him, and I think that just makes me think he wants to be a pro. And Rick Pitino has said that, and Luis has said that, so I just feel like that's probably the most likely scenario because he plays so hard, like so hard, and I think that ability that he shows as as an elite role player could potentially, is he a Josh Hart archetype type of deal like for NBA teams? Could they look at him as that type of guy because he's so big, he can play make a little bit, he can guard multiple positions, he's going to be awesome in transition. So that's like the path for him in the NBA. I think that's probably the most likely. If you're putting a cheeseburger to my head right now, that would be where I think he plays next year.
Did you say cheeseburger?
We did.
Could we get cheeseburgers? No, we can't stop talking. All right, let's keep it going. Darian Williams, Texas Tech, number 6 on the board. I love this guy.
Love him.
Like one of the smartest basketball players in all of college basketball. But this is your guy. Got me on the ISO here, but this is Trotter's guy. I love the versatility. I love the fact that he can play multiple spots on the floor. I thought he unlocked that playbook because you could do so many different things with him. You could play him in the post. You could give him the ball, let him come off ball screen so you can invert a lot of your different actions. He was huge. Tell me your take on Darian.
Well, I love him like a son, or like a brother. I think he is an unbelievable.
I think he's older than it's
we're
close.
the same.
Yeah.
We're probably close to the same age. So he's like a little brother. I think he's unbelievable. I think he's a walking 15, 5, and 5 next year, regardless of where he plays. He can play on the ball. He can play off the ball. He can be an awesome, post-up hub. Those mid-post ISOs where he can get over his left shoulder are just, it's money in the bank. The playmaking is huge. Defensively, he just adds a lot of pieces. So I think he's a guy that will play college basketball next year. Again, commanding a huge number. And you're trying to now look, it's like, all right, which teams have openings at the 4 that have the type of money that could get Darian Williams? Kansas is a big name to watch there in that one. They have a huge hole at the 4. The ability to play next to Flory Badunga and play next to Darren Peterson and play next to some of the guys they've added in the portal, like
Tyron Stokes said he's not going to college next year, so they've got resources. I'm just saying.
Yeah, the cap space makes sense there, and Darren Williams, that would be another Texas Tech guy to transfer to Kansas after we saw Kevin McCullough do a similar thing a couple years ago. BYU would be another team that you kind of have to bring up with the type of money they have and the opening that they could potentially have at the 4.
You think they can get another one?
BYU has unlimited money, in my opinion, it feels like.
Wow.
So I wouldn't say that BYU would be the team I'd pick right now. I think Kansas is certainly the number 1 team to watch right there. But Darren Williams is a complete stud, and he's going to be one of the best players in college basketball next season. Personally, selfishly, if I was in charge of the rankings alone, it'd be really hard for me not to have him number 1. He is unbelievable.
Ooh, Ebos, Travis. You hear that? He just threw some shade. We'll talk about it later. Real quick plug for me, Jameer Watkins. Just want to talk about him leaving Florida State. Second team All-ACC last year. 18-plus points, 6 rebounds, 2-plus assists, 1+ steal per game, but it was the efficiencies that weren't great. Negative assist-to-turnover ratio, just 32% from the three-point line. But I will say this, I think that three-point shooting number is misleading. When you look at his open catch-and-shoot threes, it was vastly higher, about 39%, and he was top 15 in the country in fouls drawn. So doesn't always do a great job of weaponizing his athleticism because he needs to improve his handle, but he's so physical, he can get himself to the free throw line. If Jameer Watkins gets to an up-tempo program, he is going to be a game changer in college basketball next season, but he too is one of those players that is both in the portal and has declared for the NBA draft, so we will see what level we see him at next season. All right, let's turn the page now and talk about the best classes thus far coming out of the portal. Trotter, we're just going to break down the top 4. You get a look at them there. Michigan right now, number 1, followed by St. John's, Louisville, Kentucky, Iowa, Indiana, tied for 7th, Creighton and Auburn, LSU, and Washington rounding out the top 10. You will notice there are some extreme differentials from a volume perspective. Louisville only has 3 players, and yet they're in the top 3, which means their quality is exceptional, whereas you have Iowa there with 8 different commits, showing that quantity was a big emphasis for them. You can also see the breakdowns of 5 stars and 4 stars in that class. But Trotter, we already talked about Michigan having the number 1 ranked player overall in the portal, but they got a lot more than that. Talk to us about Dusty May's class.
Yeah, Dusty May likes his big men, right? Like the ability to revamp that roster, right? Vlad Golden is going to be gone. Danny Wolf is going to be a first-round pick potentially. So they had to go do work in the portal, and they go to Merez Johnson, a familiar face from Illinois, complete rebounding machine. He could be one of the top per-minute rebounders in the country next year. And then a Damara as well from UCLA. You think about it with Yaxel Lindenborg, Merez Johnson, Damara. It's like people are like, oh, what? So many bigs, right? So many bigs. All of those guys do different things. Lindenborg is a pass dribble shoot 4. Merez Johnson is a rim runner who can really, really rebound, and he just flies up and down the floor. Really vertical, is a vertical athlete there as well. And then Damara is like that post-up guy who can, whip dimes behind his head and has a chance to be, a really interesting piece for them. So yeah, all of those bigs should be helpful. The huge X factor is Elliot Cadeau out of North Carolina, the point guard there. He is tantalizing at times with his ability to get into the paint at will, to get those big fellows the ball, hit the lob threats. He should have absolutely a lob threat there with Merez Johnson, a post-up guy that he can find with Damara. Lindenborg will be huge for him, but it just comes down to the consistency with that jumper and what type of defender are you getting with Elliot Cadeau? Because there's been times where he's a very good defender. There have been times where he actively hurts your defense with some Olay defense at the point of attack. If they can unlock him, he has a chance to be, could he lead the Big Ten in assists next year? That's not crazy with this roster construction. A lot of things are kind of hinging on Cadeau being very good. And Dusty May, it's kind of a little bit of a risk, but it's a gamble he's willing to take. And he's kind of earned the benefit of the doubt with some of last year we were like, oh, is Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden not going to work? Worked out pretty well. So same type of frustrations now. Wouldn't be surprising to me at all if Dusty May figures a way to figure it out.
Elliot's got to get his swag back. I mean, the the visible inconsistencies in his shooting mechanics this year at North Carolina and last year as a freshman, I think relative to high school, were just totally different. You could see he did not play with anywhere near the same flow, rhythm, confidence. He's got to get that back. I think that impacted his turnovers, which we didn't necessarily talk about yet, but second overall in the ACC in turnovers. We know he can thread the needle, but you got to take care of the basketball as well, especially when you're talking about live ball turnovers. You're giving up transition baskets because of it. So Elliot Cadeau certainly of huge importance there. Let's talk about St. John's. Number 2 class overall right now in the portal. We said RJ will not be coming back, but they have replaced essentially 4 starters there. It began with Bryce Hopkins, who was widely considered to be headed to Georgetown. Of course, he once played for Ed Cooley at Providence. He will stay in the Big East, but now he will play for Rick Pitino. They've got Uzziah Sellers coming in from Stanford. They've got Ian Jackson from North Carolina, Elliot Cadeau's former teammate, that Rick Pitino tweeting that he's his next point guard. I present that to you without comment. And then they have Josan Sannon. The interesting thing to me about Sannon and Jackson, both of these guys were top 25 recruits a year ago. They both had one-and-done aspirations. They go to St. John's, I don't want to say on the rebound, but clearly with the NBA still on their mind, that hasn't necessarily been part of the talking point yet. But we know both of those guys are going to want to get to the NBA sooner rather than later. What's your take on this St. John's class?
Well, St. John's finished outside the top 200 in half-court offense last year. That's not good enough. I think that this group has a chance to have a much higher ceiling offensively. Uzziah Sellers is a plus shooter. Ian Jackson is a plus shooter. Josan Sannon, I would put him pound for pound. You want to play horse against somebody. Like, Josan Sannon is not the guy you want to play horse
Late
against.
January, he was 47% from the three-point line. He ended on a slump, and I think it finished around 37 or 38%, but he was making them.
Yeah, so then you add those shooters to a Bryce Hopkins and a Zuby Ejiofor front court. Like, this group is going to be super physical. Hopkins, I think, is going to be a massive X factor. He's only played 4 games since New Year's Day in 2024, so it's been a while since we've seen him actually play games, but I think he can be a half-court hub for this group. I think he can be a mismatch hunter, those pick-and-pop threes, attacking long closeouts, and then the glass. Like, St. John's is going to be a monster on the glass with Hopkins and Ejiofor. Like, I love St. John's this year. I think St. John's and UConn, boy, both of those 2 teams are going to be at the absolute top of the Big East. Those games are going to be really, really fun and high-level games next year. 2
very different roster plans. One program went out and acquired 4 different starters. The other program went out and retained basically everybody, brought in a starter in Silas Demery and another guard in Malachi Smith. Number 3 class in the country is Louisville. We talked about it. They only have 3 players, but they got a brand new backcourt. Adrian Woolley, maybe the best mid-major transfer in the country. Eric Bossi is going to tell us more on that later, coming from Kennesaw State. Ryan Conwell, just a terrific shooter from Xavier. Isaac McNeely, another terrific shooter from Virginia. And that's what I want to talk about. The collective shooting at Virginia is awesome. And the fact that they got Mikkel Brown, who's arguably the best pure point guard in high school basketball, to kind of orchestrate all that, the spacing they are going to have, the creativity that Pat Kelsey is going to be afforded with his playbook, with multiple shooters on the floor at the same time, multiple movement shooters. That's going to be a really fun thing to watch. My question for you is, given that they have allocated so many resources to their backcourt with those 3 transfers, let's face it, they were all expensive transfers. Mikkel Brown was not cheap out of high school either. What does that leave in the front court?
Yeah, they had to mix and match it a little bit. And Sananda Fru is a guy that I would keep a really close eye on. Our recruiting rankings team loves him, a big man out of Germany. And
he's 22 years old.
That's
so
what
he's
saying.
A freshman. He's going to be a 22-year-old freshman next year.
And we saw international big men but like move from the international game to the college game and had a lot of success this year. Like Tomislav Ivisic at Illinois was very, very good. Samet Yagitoglu at SMU was a really productive high major starter. I think that's what Louisville expects out of Fru, could be a difference maker for them. But they have their irons in the fire in a lot of different ways. We know what Pat Kelsey wants to do. He wants to play 8, 9, 10 guys. You need multiple bigs. So Cason Pryor, we expect him to get back. Javon Hadley, talking about the portal is great, but retention wins championships. Keeping a guy like Hadley and Pryor in your system will be huge. And then you throw in James Scott. Could you potentially get him back? And then Ali Khalifa is another huge X factor,
Love
right?
That guy.
A kid out of BYU. He's really transformed his body.
BYU last year sat out this season.
Correct.
Yeah.
And he transformed his body. He looks great, right? He looks really great right now, and he can shoot a little bit, but the playmaking as a 5-out
pass.
Yeah, that's something where you see those dribble handoff things that they could run with a McNeely or with a Ryan Conwell, in addition to what they're going to do in transition. Like, Louisville's loaded. Louisville's really, really loaded. Think about another game I'm really excited about. Louisville, Kentucky. Like, yes, please, sign me up. Both those teams think that they have chances to be a Final Four team next year. And, it's hard to disagree with the rosters that they put together right now.
All right, now we've got Travis Branham waiting for us here. We've said he's been on the phone here. So real quick, though, just want to talk. Give me your 30-second version on that other team from Kentucky. Mark Pope, what has he got coming in?
Yeah, it's a
number 4 class.
Great class. Jelon Lowe, I think, is a huge bounce-back candidate. Is going to be awesome for them. Jaden Quaintance is maybe the highest ceiling transfer in this class. If he gets healthy, he could be a potential top 5, top 6 pick next year. And then they've just added terrific pieces surrounding that. Cam Williams out of Tulane can really shoot it. Denzel Aberdeen can guard and shoot it, played at a high level for the national champions at Florida. So, yeah, Mo Diabate, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring him up. One of my favorite defenders in this portal haul. He can guard literally anybody. So Kentucky, the roster looks a lot different, but they're going to be very, very good this year in year 2.
Maybe not as good of a shooting team in Lexington, but certainly a more athletic team. I think a better defensive team as well. All right, let's bring in Travis Branham back to the show. We've said he's been working the phones all day long with the latest intel. Trav, before we get going here, has anything popped up in the last hour that you need to make us aware of?
Just like I was saying earlier, it's going to be a day of guys entering the transfer portal with no eligibility left. And here we are. Dawson Garcia out of Minnesota has entered the transfer portal. So, again, another guy with no eligibility. It's remained a fairly quiet day up to this point, aside from the big news that Rodney Rice is headed to USC.
Trav, let me ask you this. People at home are watching and they're saying, if he doesn't have any eligibility, why is he entering into the transfer portal? Can you explain what the methodology is for these kids, just hoping they get another year of eligibility?
Yeah, it's really just an insurance policy at this point. These kids, everyone, all year we've been discussing about the looming possibility that the NCAA grants these players fifth-year blanket waivers, and that's going to be just part of NCAA college basketball across all classes where everybody gets to play 5 years. So these guys are hitting the transfer portal in hopes that that passes, and it doesn't sound likely at all. The waivers will not be granted as much this year, because if you grant one of these waivers, it's going to be an avalanche of lawsuits and other waivers. So I think the likelihood of a guy like Dawson Garcia or Ian Schieffelin out of Clemson getting these waivers and playing again in college basketball is very, very just not likely. And these guys know that, to be honest with you. The best question is, why is the NCAA allowing them to enter and show up in the transfer portal?
That's my question. I understand why the kids are doing it, because as we said, like, quite frankly, if they're not NBA players, even if they are, they would make more money in the open market in college basketball right now. But why the NCAA is even permitting these players who don't have eligibility to go into the portal is what I don't understand. If you're saying they're not eligible, don't let them in the portal. I can't put my name in the portal. Why can they put their name? Or maybe I could. Can I put my name in the portal?
I'll check. We'll check with compliance.
We'll get to that later. Trav, let's talk about intel here, because you are all over these guys. Want to talk about some of the best available names. Andre Stojakovic, first and foremost, coming out of Cal Berkeley. What is the latest on his recruitment?
Yeah, so over the weekend, this thing was popping off. You had schools including Illinois, Florida, North Carolina, Clemson, Michigan, several others, all trying to get involved in this situation. He is actually on campus currently at Illinois, and by all means, it sounds like Illinois is the team to beat. They are in the driver's seat, and it frankly would not surprise me to see him make a commitment before he leaves campus.
All right, so we will be on the lookout for that. Trotter, Stojakovic started at Stanford, last year at Cal Berkeley, played with the ball in his hands a lot. What's fascinating to me is, as much as he improved last season, we did not see the growth in the shooting that we expected, because his dad's Peja Stojakovic, a prolific all-time NBA three-point shooter. Many people, including myself, expected Andre to follow suit and be able to shoot the ball at a high level. That hasn't happened, but we've seen growth in other areas.
Yeah, I think that the Illinois fit would make a lot of sense, because it's just like, okay, we're going to bring the Balkan brothers is going to be a real thing, right? Like Tomislav Visic, Zvonimir Visic, and then Andre Stojakovic, like adding him to that mix could be interesting. Illinois has a position to be maybe the best shooting front court in college basketball next year, with two centers that could shoot and make over 53s. That would open up the rim, where where Stojakovic is terrific. 42% rim rate last year. He got to the rim at will, got to the free throw line a ton. The paint would be wide open for him at Illinois. So it makes sense why both of those, Stojakovic camps like Illinois and why Illinois likes Stojakovic for the potential roster fit that they have. Somebody's
going to have to guard in that group, though. That would seem to be important. Trav, Cedric Howard, am I pronouncing that correctly? Coming out of Washington.
Yes,
Coming out of Washington State is one of my favorite players in the portal, but the sample size was so small this year. Started out as a D3 player. Tell us a little bit about his story and the latest on his recruitment.
Yeah, just played a handful of games this past season before suffering a shoulder injury. Had to get surgery, missed the remainder of the season, but was definitely moving up NBA draft boards. And he is currently going through the NBA draft process as well as the college transfer portal. So this is one that amongst our team of guys, as we're ranking these transfers, we all actually love him. We're just being a little bit more conservative with his current ranking just based on that injury and the limited sample size of this past year. But in regards to not only going through the transfer process, this thing sounds to be down to just two options when it comes to college, and that's Duke and Alabama. So I think a decision could come soon. But again, whichever of those two schools he goes to, they're going to be holding their breath from now until May 28th when that deadline comes, because I know a lot of NBA teams really like him, and it wouldn't surprise me to see him get some sort of guaranteed deal or a two-way deal.
Cedric Howard, 6'6", 7-foot wingspan, reported 18.7 rebounds, 4 assists, and almost 2 blocks per game last year on 56, 40, 84 shooting. Again, only 6 games, so the sample size is small, but you're not going to find a more versatile numbers without those kind of measurables on top. So certainly one of the more intriguing prospects. And Trav, I have been having fun in this one just because I'm not in charge of these transfer portal rankings. So whenever I can just kind of like give off some hate, I'm like, Trotter, what are you doing? Like, he's not a top 30 prospect in the country. What are we talking about here? So I'm just having fun with that one. You mentioned he is an option for Alabama. Alabama has also potentially in the mix for Rylan Griffin, a player who played for the Crimson Tide just 2 years ago. I mean, I assume they can't take both of these guys. So break that one down for us.
Yeah, I think the Rylan Griffin transfer process will be coming to an end fairly soon. He's been recruited by a handful of schools, most notably was supposed to be taking a visit to Kentucky, but that was before Denzel Aberdeen took the spot. And now Kentucky is locked and loaded for next season. So now these options are dwindling down themselves organically. And it seems to be that Alabama is now the team to beat. And I would anticipate, if all things go according to plan, that we should have an announcement fairly soon for the Crimson Tide.
So, Trav, let me just ask you by extension here. If we see Griffin to Alabama, does that mean Coward is likely headed to Duke?
I'd personally give Duke the edge in the Cedric Coward sweepstakes personally. However, if you want to theorize it and talk about the roster construction, you can certainly play a Cedric Coward and a Rylan Griffin alongside each other. And I would imagine that Nate Oates in this program would have no problem pitching that.
All right. Speaking of Alabama, we got another one to talk about. That's Darion Reed. Came in with a ton of expectations last year as a freshman out of prolific prep, but battled injuries all season long. Missed time over the summer with injury. Never really got into a great rhythm. Now he is in the portal. What is the latest on this former top 30 recruit?
So he really kicked things off yesterday. He went and took a visit to NC State. Believe he is finishing that visit up today. So he's meeting with Will Wade. When he hit the portal, all eyes kind of went to Will Wade on this recruitment. However, other teams are going to get their shot. I don't think this thing is going to be shut down that quickly with a commitment or anything over the next 24 hours. I am looking at Ole Miss and Oklahoma as well in this recruitment. And also a return to Alabama is not off the table. But still, as of right now, I would kind of classify NC State as the leader, but Ole Miss right behind them.
Does Oklahoma have that kind of buying power left, or we think they're still – we're going to talk more about the finances, but do we think they've got the money to get a high sticker guy, Trotter? What do you think about that?
I like the roster that they have right now. Xavier Brown, the addition out of St. Joe's is huge. They have Tay Davis as well. Nigel Pack is big, but they have a big hole at like the 3-4 combo-ish like type of deal because Jeff Nwankwo, one of my favorite, JUCO transfer up guys, had a huge injury last year that he's coming back from. So it fits with what their roster is, in Oklahoma, in the SEC.
I just wonder if it fits with the budget.
Yeah, but in the SEC, like, money is going into these teams left and right. And if you don't have money, like, you're going to finish at the bottom of the league, just as LSU and South Carolina.
All right, there you go. Trav, let me ask you this. My perception of Oklahoma's budget is they were playing from behind in a big way last season. And while it has gotten better, it's been challenged by the fact that everybody's has gotten better. Is that a fair summary of their budget right now?
They've definitely been way more aggressive in this transfer portal.
Okay.
You talk around not only just the SEC, but around the country. Porter Moser has been talked about as being one of the most aggressive guys out there in the market this year. And obviously, he's shown that in getting Nigel Pack out of Miami. Just got Xavier Brown last night. He talked about a package deal also came with Justin Scott from St. Joseph's. But they also went out and got Tay Davis out of Notre Dame, that hybrid forward that put up big numbers for them this year. So they've had a great portal class, but when it comes to NIL and resources, it seems like they have definitely hit the come up and they were very aggressive with it.
All right, let me ask you about one more guy who was a high-level recruit and hasn't necessarily hit on that just yet. Raquise Passmore from Kansas. What is the latest on his process out of the portal?
Yeah, there's been a big development with him. Miami was in the driver's seat. They're nearing the finish line and getting this thing done. However, I've been told this thing is now back open and he is on the market, ready to hear from more schools. He did take a visit to Virginia as well as Miami. So the Cavaliers could still be involved with this one, but there's a slew of new schools that are showing and inquiring interest out there. So this one, while it was near the finish line and about to come to a conclusion, now we are back in trying to monitor what's going to be happening next, and this thing's going to continue to play out.
Yeah, it seems like there could be some redundancies there at Miami after they got the commitment from Shelton Henderson, the high school prospect, top 20 prospect in the country who was initially committed to Duke, just flipped to Miami. Of course, they've got a top 15 transfer class, Trey Donaldson, True Washington, Malik Renault, and Ernest Uday as well. So Jay Lucas doing an incredible job of rebuilding the talent in a hurry. Should also mention Dante Allen, the former Villanova commit, is now committed there as well. He's one of my favorites in the high school level. Speaking of high school, Trav, let's talk about some of the players who are back available. We've seen a couple of big commitments. Just mentioned Shelton Henderson, Nate Amen in recent days. Darius Adams and Caden Lewis, two players who have reopened their recruitment. And I think it's fair to say both came as a byproduct of just kind of getting a better sense of what the rotation was going to look like at the schools they initially committed to in UConn and Kentucky, respectively. But where does that leave them in the process at this point? Let's start with Darius Adams. What's the latest on him?
Yeah, so just decommitted from UConn in recent days. And since he has reopened his recruitment, he's already heard from nearly 15 schools, and that comes as no surprise. He's a McDonald's All-American, was one of the top high school players in the country, playing for La Lumiere on the EYSL. So some of the schools are familiar with him already. One of the schools that I'm told is showing interest and that could really pick up some steam, in my opinion, is the Tennessee Volunteers. They recruit him heavily out of high school. They finished in his finalists, and now they miss on Rodney Rice. So where will they turn? There's not too many wings and guards left out there, so they could turn to him. I've also been told that North Carolina has shown interest, as has Maryland, Indiana, and Alabama, amongst many, many others. So while this is open, I am told that this thing could move fairly quickly. So stay tuned over at 24/7 Sports as the developments for this one continue to happen.
All right. I know you got to check your phone as it is buzzing, no doubt. But before you go, tell me about Caden Lewis, the former Kentucky pledge who was just on campus at Georgia, it looks like yesterday. What's his latest?
Yeah, just finishing up his visit at Georgia, was at Villanova this weekend and also was at St. John's last week. However, this seems to be coming down to just two teams in Georgia and Villanova. Miami is another school that has been involved in this recruitment, but they may not get their opportunity to bring him on a visit, and this decision could be made between Villanova and Georgia. And so determining who actually is the leader, I've heard some conflicting information on that. Obviously, Kevin Willard is in need of a point guard, especially with Jacoby Gillespie. Going to Tennessee, now you lose on Rodney Rice. His name just continues to get brought up in this show. But the dominoes are falling. And so the need for a guy like Caden Lewis for Kevin Willard, and also for Georgia, who lost Silas Emery to UConn this cycle, this thing's going to be a bit of a war over these next few days.
All right, so Caden Lewis finding places where he's capable of making an immediate impact. Trav, thanks as always. We will let you get back to the phone, but for much more of Travis's work, be sure to visit 247sports.com. We've got you covered. We've got recruiting rankings, wall-to-wall team coverage, and transfer portal updates. 247sports.com. All right, now, as we said at the beginning of the show, we are going to take your questions. So we are going to go and see what happens here. We've had a couple of questions submitted from YouTube, so shout out to Kyle Fredericks. Trotter, here's a question. Right now, who are your top 5 teams in the country?
Boy, kind of getting me on a bad one here. I will go number 1. I will go with Houston. I think if they can get Milos Uzan back, Emmanuel Sharp, JoJo Tugler, awesome recruiting class, Kelvin Sampson, that sounds like a number 1 team in the country to me. I think that you could throw in, a Purdue. Purdue makes a lot of sense with Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman-Renback, Fletcher Lawyer as well. They're going to be really good. I think Duke, Cam Boozer does not lose basketball games, so I'm told. So, probably should throw him in there. I think that, especially if you throw, let's just play the hypotheticals. If they get a Cedric Coward, Duke is going to be in just fine shape with Cedric Coward and Cam Boozer.
Caleb Foster coming back.
Caleb Foster as well. Yeah, so, that team is loaded. I would look at Texas Tech. I think that's a group that makes a lot of sense. JT Toppin is back. Christian Anderson is back. Toppin, Big 12 Player of the Year. Anderson, I think, is going to be a breakout sophomore, if you can. He had an awesome freshman year as well, but I think he'll level up, and they did a terrific job in the portal as well. Luan Watts is awesome. Donovan Atwell, transfer out of UNC Greensboro, can shoot the cover off the ball. Santa Clara transfer, Tyree Bryan is another big name to watch there as well. And then, who is that 4? I think I had room for one more. I'll throw St. John's in there. I think this is a group that I think could be one of the best teams.
You were on the Johnnies last year.
It is. That's scary to double down on it. And this roster is a little younger than last year, maybe a few more questions defensively than last year's team, but that team is really, really talented.
So here's my thing with St. John's, and I had this question last year, so and obviously I was proven wrong, even though they were what they were in half-court offense. I don't know who the ball movers are. They've got scorers, they've got competitors, they've got great prospects. When it comes to the connective tissue and the guys who make the extra pass, I don't know. That was my question last year, and they figured it out. So Rick Pitino knows more about basketball than I do, but on the surface, when you look at Ian Jackson and Joe Sansanin right there, they're both shot takers, and they're both Ian Jackson especially at the point. That dude was hunting buckets this year at North Carolina. So that's going to be interesting. And as a reminder, folks, if you are watching us on YouTube, make sure you make sure you subscribe. And also make sure you keep submitting your questions. We're going to continue to do this for as long as we are on the air. Trotter, got one more from you from War Prophet. No judgment. War Prophet. Love it. What happens to players in the portal who don't get picked up today when the portal closes? I'll start with this one. Just as a reminder, you don't have to make your commitment by the end of the day today. You just have to put your name in the portal. Essentially, you have to declare your free agency by the end of the day. You don't have to decide where you're going. So we do not expect all the players to be off the board. There is no deadline for when they have to make a commitment. We're essentially just establishing the market by the end of the day today. Anything to add to that?
It's a good question because it brought up something else I was thinking about. Committed means nothing in the portal right now. So, you're going to see a lot of guys that say, I committed to this spot. But I think in this next little wave here of transfer portal decisions will be the flipping season, right? Can you get a guy who's maybe committed to one place, you miss out on one of your top 2 targets, and you can get him to flip to you? I think that could be in play. Now, remember, the biggest domino of that last year was John Tonje, who was basically scheduled and slated to go to New Mexico. Wisconsin misses out on some of their big guys, big targets after losing A.J. Storr to the portal to Kansas. They flip John Tonje. John Tonje turns into one of the best players in college basketball this season. So being committed right now does not mean that they're not up for grabs, and teams are going to try to take advantage of that the best that they can.
All right, so as a reminder, make sure you share, subscribe, continue to answer your questions because we're talking about everything, including who's got the most buying power. When it comes down to resources, this is somewhat speculative, but with so many players on the market, with wide-ranging reporting from the likes of our Travis Branham, CBS Sports' Matt Norlander, we can start to distill who the highest-paying programs are in college basketball. And Trotter, these aren't just the programs with the most buying power. These are the programs that are believed to be over $10 million, and let's call it what it is, salary next season. Arkansas, BYU, Duke, Indiana, Kentucky, Louisville, Michigan, North Carolina, St. John's, and Texas Tech. Again, this is based on the reporting of our own Travis Branham and Matt Norlander. And again, this is not totally definitive. The contracts are not public, but this is based on what we, Matt and Travis, have been able to gather through all of their reporting. Those are big numbers.
They're big numbers.
Big numbers.
The thing that's fun to me is that, like, you give big numbers to also coaches that have proof of concept in the portal, like a Grant McCasland down at Texas Tech, who's done a great job with less money before, even dating back to North Texas, and what they've done now. And you give big numbers to a coach like that who can go pluck the pieces that he wants. That's a really, really scary thought for the rest of the Big 12 or some of those things. So, yeah, money is so important. But, like, I'm also trusting, like, those, like, the combination of a really good coach in the portal and that type of money. That's, like, why Texas Tech would be a top 5 team in the country for me.
And let's just pull back the curtain a little bit. While we are waiting for this landscape to continue to evolve, we're waiting for judges to make rulings and for petitions to be filed and all that stuff. There is no collective bargaining. Contracts have become more and more the norm, but they are not necessarily shared. So we can say, like, okay, we know what the rate was for someone like Rob Wright, but we haven't seen the contract. So for the vast majority of these players, you don't know what the contract has said. I've heard some of these players actually have buyouts written into their contract now. So it's becoming very interesting. And I think part of the reconnaissance, if you will, as we talk about the GM and the roster construction approaches, is these teams being able to figure out, hey, we're competing. If Adam is competing against Isaac for player A, I need to know how much you're offering. And maybe player A is telling me a number that isn't legitimate. And so the due diligence of figuring out what's real and what isn't is a huge part of this process right now, because nothing is transparent.
Well, and it's all, like, subjective, right? Like, and what number is real, what number is fake, like, and that's the thing. Like, you don't want to bid too much because, again, like, you're trying to be a good GM. You're like, this is the salary cap. Like, you cannot overextend yourself to do it. And now, I joked with somebody, like, there's always enough money. The teams can always find enough money to figure it out, and maybe you just go back and ask for more. I know that was a thing that happened at Kansas State last year, where they went back and got a little bit more than what
happened at Oklahoma. They had to do a raise for Jeremiah Fierce.
Correct. So, like, that, they're going to find ways to add more money to it, but there is a real incentive to get some of these things done quickly because, as you mentioned, the House settlement, once that goes into play, pay-for-play, objectively, is kind of dead at that point. All of your pay-for-play dollars are basically dead. So that's why teams are trying to sign guys to contracts right now before the judge goes into play with that House settlement, because when that happens, then you have fair market value. Then it comes to be a lot more of a salary cap, and hopefully...
Then it's legitimately professional sports.
Yeah, it's hopefully more of, like, a semblance of order, and then you have to also prove that your NIL dollars are being used for true NIL.
Right, and so I think what that means is after you get from that pay-to-play, the players still have an opportunity to profit off their name, image, and likeness, but not necessarily just from a booster who's going to pay you $3 million to come play from his school. The best example of that I would give, or maybe the most visible one, is Cooper Flagg in the NCAA tournament. If you saw those commercials, he would still be able to do that on top of whatever he gets. Again, this is projecting a year or two down the road. Whatever he would get in revenue sharing, he would still be able to sign those NIL deals on top of that, but it would have to go through some sort of governing body that would evaluate them and deem them to be true NIL and not specific to just one school. Is that a fair summary of where we hope and expect this will go?
Yeah, Deloitte is going to have a lot of billable hours, I think, is the kind of the joke in college basketball circles, that as they kind of go through all of these contracts and making sure the guys that are scheduled to do something with Dairy Queen actually do it, right? You know, if you're going to flip a blizzard upside down.
No doubt about it. Now, here's the thing. With so many schools having $10+ million, there's a cautionary when you are spending that kind of money and that money is not coming from your university, when that money is coming from third parties, whether it's individuals or third-party companies, groups, whatever the case may be, you are in some way, shape, or form indebted to those people, and they have a say in your future. I think what happens now is you see college coaches, when it used to be that when you took a new job, unless there was some sort of exception, usually you had 4, typically 5 years to turn that thing around. That is not the case anymore. If you've got money and you've got buying power, the expectation is you can flip it right away. You can do what Pat Kelsey did. You can do what Dusty May did. You can do what so many others have proven capable of doing. And when coaches are able to do that in just one season, that means that people who are investing their money expect you to be able to do the same thing. Cautionary tales like Indiana last year. Cautionary tales like Texas. Rodney Terry only had 2 seasons at the helm of that program, 2 full seasons after his interim year. Got to the NCAA tournament. If this were 5 years ago, he'd still be the head coach of Texas, in my opinion. But because the perception is he had a lot of resources at his disposal, that runway is now a whole lot shorter.
And fit matters. And Kansas State is another cautionary tale of that. Like, they had really, really good money, but the fit didn't really go that well, right? Like Doug McDaniel, Coleman Hawkins, Ugana Onyensu, like all those type of guys, just it didn't mesh together in the way that a lot of people expected. And, I hate to look at the past, to be honest, because it feels like this cycle is so different than compared to the others. But I don't think it's a coincidence that the highest paid player in college basketball last year, whether that was Coleman Hawkins, who was rumored to over $2 million, Great Osper over $2 million, Umar Ballo had plenty of money. Like, those guys didn't make the NCAA tournament, and so will that stick this year? I'm not so sure, because I think some of them made a little bit smarter decisions in the transfer portal. But it's certainly a cautionary tale that money does not equal wins.
When you talk about the history, recent history, I want to make this point. Janai Broome, Mark Sears, Dalton Knecht from 2 years ago. Those guys were true stars of college basketball who transferred up after being mid-major players initially. We're going to dive into that topic, and in order to do that, I'm going to welcome in 24/7 Sports Director of Basketball, Eric Bossi, as I like to call him, the resident OG in the recruiting space. E-Boss, welcome in. So as we said, we've seen mid-major guys in recent years transfer up and become true stars of college basketball. When you look at this current portal class, who is potentially the next in that line?
Well, there's a lot of guys, but 3 guys stand out to me, and that's Adrian Woolley, headed to Louisville from Kennesaw State, Xavier Lee, headed to Florida from Princeton, and Lamar Wilkerson heading to Indiana from Sam Houston State. I like the situations that all those guys are walking into, and we're going to go through a little bit more about them, but I just feel like they're all guys who seem to be perfect fits and have a lot of opportunity to step up and do things. Now, ideally, when you're talking about a Janai Broome, he had multiple years in this situation. So Adrian Woolley, as a freshman coming from Kennesaw State, is the only one who potentially has multiple years. But those are 3 guys that really stand out to me right away.
Yeah, so let me ask you more about Woolley, because we just talked about Louisville's recruiting class, spent big money. They got 3 guards. But Woolley is the only one coming from the mid-major ranks. What is it about this Kennesaw State transfer that makes you so enthusiastic about what he could be in the long run?
There's a lot of things that make me enthusiastic about him. But number one, you guys were just talking about fit. I think he's a guy who really, really fits. Obviously, Louisville, you've got a potential superstar freshman point guard coming in Michael Brown, and you want to have pieces around him to make the game easier. And not only does he have pieces around to make the game easier, Woolley has pieces to make it easier. We've got Ryan Conwell, Isaac McNeely, 2 really experienced guys coming in to kind of take the pressure off those guys who can really shoot the ball and really spread things out. And that's the thing about Woolley, is he's another guy who's a playmaker with the ball in his hands. He fits those guys, and he's also another guy who shoots the 3 at an incredible rate. He made it over 42% this year with 73 makes, which is a lot. You expect that number can maybe go up, but what I like is he's a guy who I think has NBA potential ultimately, but there's not going to be that pressure for him to come in and be the guy right away. And we look at that Janai Broome model. He's a guy that I see building over the next couple of years into a really, a monster.
Boss, Xavier Lee found himself on NBA draft boards a year ago, played out the year at Princeton. I don't want to say it was a disappointing year, but I think it was kind of NCAA tournament or bust when you have that kind of roster in the Ivy League. Now he's going to Florida to play for the national champions, and he's got to replace a guy in Walter Clayton who led Florida to a national championship, who had huge heroics. Those are big, big shoes to fill. Now, Florida, it looks like we've still got, 11 hours here, but It looks like they are on the verge of retaining the vast majority of that front court, which I think would give them the best front court in college basketball to start the season. What can we expect from Lee next year for the Gators?
It's really interesting. That front court is a big issue, right? And obviously they've still got to wait out some NBA decisions probably with the front court. But with Lee, I think you've got the Walter Clayton roadmap. You've got a guy who has proven that he can get to his spots off the dribble, that he's not afraid to take a big shot from deep. And while he's not always the highest efficiency guy, he's a guy that when it all breaks down and you need someone to go get a bucket or make a play for someone else, he can go ahead and get that accomplished. And, if you're Florida, he sure better be able to do that, because right now he's the only experienced playmaker really that you've got coming back. Alex Lloyd is a great looking freshman, but to expect him to come in and do a lot of big things off the dribble early on is really too much for him. So that pressure is going to be on Lee. And I think the biggest question that he's going to have to answer is he ready for the physicality and overall athleticism of the SEC? I think he's a pretty athletic guy himself, but let's face it, the athletes he's going to be going against on a nightly basis in the Ivy League are just a little bit different than what he's going to face in the SEC. So Todd Golden's going to need him to be able to make that transition quickly. And I think he's up for it. I think he's game.
All right. Bossi says he wants all the smoke. I want to give you an opportunity to get in on this. Who is your mid-major guy you have your eyes on?
Yeah, I look at Michael Rataj, who's transferring from Oregon State to Baylor. That feels a little bit like cheating because Oregon State was a high major team before, but this is
Were they?
Kind of. Yeah, like
Were they?
6'9", 220 pounds, can pass, dribble, and shoot. He had some enormous games. I think Baylor just found a really terrific chess piece that they can build some of their offense around. I also think the defensive versatility that he showcased is really impressive, and just the frame, the size, the ability to cut, like the shooting from the top of the key, his drives, like it's all really, really good stuff. So the more that I watched him, the more I was really enamored with the ability to be a complete difference maker for them right away. I think Baylor found a gem in Michael Rataj.
All right, we're coming back for another one. Don't go anywhere. Boss, you mentioned Lamar Wilkins going from Sam Houston State to Indiana. What is it about him that you find so intriguing?
So Darian DeVries is really going to want to spread the floor with shooters and, space. And you look at Tucker DeVries, his son, he can shoot the ball. Reed Bailey coming in has started to turn into a really good shooter during his junior year at Davidson, even if he doesn't take a ton of shots from outside. But he likes guys with some size who can spread the floor, and I think Wilkerson fits that bill. And what I really like about Wilkerson is if you look at him from freshman year through junior year when he was first team All-Conference USA, there's been a steady progression. He's gone from 7 points to 13 points to 20 points. The guy made well over 100 threes at a 44.5% clip. That's ridiculous. That's a guy who is clearly one of the best shooters in the country, one of the best shooters in the portal, who is going to a system that is built for his needs and is built for his strengths. And, again, just like Xavier Lee at Florida, where Todd Golden needs him to step up, DeVries really needs Lamar Wilkinson to come in and be that guy. They've invested in him. They've got a spot for him. And I think he's a guy who could step in and, maybe potentially be like an all Big Ten type guy during that first year at Indiana if everything falls into place right.
All right, you mentioned Reed Bailey. I just want to jump in on that real quick because Reed Bailey, we put him in the rankings 3 years ago. We expected him to blossom into a star at Davidson. He did that this season. Averaged 19.6 rebounds and 4 assists per game on 48% shooting, 42% from behind the three-point line, as Bossi said, on relatively limited volume, but certainly proved he could stretch the floor. And then 77% from the free throw line, was the second leading scorer in the Atlantic 10 this season. As Boss said, we know that Indiana is going to really value floor spacing. They will get it from Bailey, who at 6'11" provides that size skill combination. He's got to rebound the ball a little bit more. He's got to get a little more physical, got to pick it up on the defensive end, but I think there's no doubt he's going to fit offensively. Trotter, you had one more guy you wanted to mention in this conversation.
Yeah, if you're going to give me a chance to talk about Nick Davidson, I'm going to take the chance to do it, right? The transfer from Nevada, he's going into Clemson. I call Clemson like the Purdue of the ACC. They're one of the most post-up heavy teams in college basketball year after year, and Davidson can really post it, but he can also shoot it as well. Over from three-point range, shot over 37% from downtown on high volume. I think he's just a total gamer plays defense at a high level, can pass it a little bit. Secondary rim protection should be there, and he's just tough and physical, and he's a tough dude. I think he's going to transfer up to the ACC and be just fine in that league. And I also like the roster construction around him as well. Carter Welling is a guy I really liked out of Utah Valley, a kind of a pogo stick center who can block shots and shoot threes. And then RJ Godfrey transferring back to Clemson, big, strong, physical forward who can really guard some of those big fours. So I think Davidson, maybe he's not going to be an All-American candidate like Janai Broome, but I think he's going to be a very, very productive player for Clemson from day one.
Now, Boss, I'm going to end this segment by sharing with you what I told Travis. I'm really enjoying not having any of these rankings blamed on me. So I'm just enjoying being able to. So I just want to know, how is Cedric Coward not ranked higher? I mean, I know he only played 6 games, but I love this dude. I mean, we talked about him earlier, the 6'6" wing, 7-foot wingspan, the shooting profile. I understand he only played 6 games, but the versatility in his game, he can go inside, he can go outside. He's got that jumbo wing potential. Talked to Travis earlier about the intel that it looks like while he's exploring the NBA draft, he's also considering Alabama and Duke. He'd obviously be a huge addition to the Blue Devils. Plug him in right next to Cameron Boozer. But tell me a little bit about Coward and the discussions that have gone on between you, Travis, and Trotter in those portal rankings.
I don't know. You might be barking up the wrong tree with me. Coward is a guy that I tried to get several big-time programs to recruit last year when he was in the portal coming out of Eastern Washington. So, I think it's a little bit of a limited sample size. You only got the 5 or 6 games at Washington State this year. Before that, you had Eastern Washington. I mean, to me, I watched this guy, and I don't see him in a college uniform next year. I know there's going to be questions about the shoulder and all that stuff, but this dude looks like an NBA player to me. He looks like an 8 to 10 year player in the NBA, and that's where I think he'll ultimately end up. But we've got time to kind of reshape these things, and I think that he's certainly a guy that we might be willing to kind of discuss a little bit and think a little bit more about where we've got him ranked. And
now, one quick follow-up question to that is it becomes one of the themes we've talked about is the number of players both in the portal and in the rankings. Will we expect, presumably, an updated rankings after the portal withdrawal date goes by, so it's limited to strictly those who will play college basketball next season?
Yeah, I think sure. Yeah, if there's guys that stay in the draft, we'll pull them out of the portal rankings, or if there's guys who return to their schools, we'll pull them out of the portal rankings. So, of course, there's going to be some tinkering that goes on, and there's going to be some random guys who go in a little bit late because their coach left after the 30-day window started and stuff like that. But for the most part, with this next update, we should be relatively solid on the rankings.
Please, no. Please, no more. No more coaching changes. No more portals. But we will look for those updated rankings over on. You want to jump in?
Well, I was just going to say, inside basketball here, we have a transfer portal scouting meeting in a couple hours after this. I'm pretty sure Cedric Coward is going to be a guy that we are boosting up just because, not because of your thing. Just because
I applied pressure on
not because of your thing. Yeah. We all really liked him. We were just scared about the injury. If we hear more that the injury is fine, I think Coward, it could be a big boost.
All right. Well, we will keep our eyes open for that. You can find that and much more over on 247sports.com. As always, we've got recruiting rankings, whether it's portal or high school, wall-to-wall team coverage, and transfer portal updates. That's 247sports.com. All right, as a reminder, everybody, you are watching the 24/7 Sports College Basketball Show on this very special edition, the final day of the transfer portal. Trotter, going to engage now in a little conversation between production versus projection in the portal. How coaches evaluate players. We got into this a little bit earlier, talking about the GM position, how some schools are starting to employ a scouting staff, how they do this year-round. But let's start with, again, kind of a 30,000-foot view of what schools should be doing at this point in time.
Well, I feel like the portal, we talk about the portal, and I think you can split it up into a lot of different ways. It's international matters. I think the transfer portal scouting of the mid-majors is a different conversation than the high major ranks. So you're looking at the high school recruiting as well. Like some of the names that have come up in the high school ranks, I would be tempted to throw them in the portal ranks as well, because it feels like a little bit like they're correlated as well. Yeah. They're taking spots as well. So it's fascinating. You talk to different, directors or GMs or coaches of like what they're looking for. It's like, with those mid-major guys, how do they play against high-major teams? For those high-major guys like that are transferring, hey, why did they leave? Like maybe the situation sucked there, and we're going to have a chance for them to get a little bit better in our opportunity. So those are like some of the conversations that are happening. But it's fascinating. It's like the portal is not just the guys in the transfer portal. It's international. It's high school. It's it's so nuanced. And I feel like if you don't have the teams that are best suited are the ones that have like their fingers in all those little areas. If you have that ability to recruit all 4 of those different areas, that's the best way to build a roster in 2025.
That reminds me very much of Nate Amen's commitment to Tennessee, because he, of course, aspires to be a one-and-done player. Tennessee, I think, had a determination to make. They needed the best forward they could find, whether it came out of the portal, whether it came from international ranks, whether it came from the high school ranks. They went with Nate Amen. Ultimately, they were able to get Nate Amen. He obviously, of course, had some great other options. But I think that's how you have to approach it. You have to approach it like everybody is on a one-year contract right now, and it's just about assessing what you can get from that player. Do you go with an 18-year-old or do you go with a 22-year-old who's played professionally in Europe for the last 3 years, but because he's made under $45,000, you think the NCAA is going to grant him eligibility? Those are the conversations that college coaches are having right now. They're having to measure high school seniors versus young men playing internationally who they think might be deemed eligible from the NCAA. So this leads me to the point about, this is what I would suggest. I think it is incumbent on any college head coach, and specifically any high major head coach right now, to have a CEO type approach. You can't just be a basketball coach in this day and age. If you are falling behind. As the CEO of your program, you have to develop a year-round scouting strategy that prepares you for the day the portal opens, knowing that hopefully you will be playing the most important games of your college season. So how do you make sure that you are not left behind if you are one of the elite teams? You have a full front office mentality where players are scouted year-round through college basketball. They're scouted through international ranks. They're scouted through high school. International and college you can do in person. College you have to do out of synergy right now unless those rules change. But I don't think moving forward in this era of the transfer portal that it is possible to build a consistent winner without scouting and evaluating talent all year long, because you can't put all your eggs in that retention basket anymore. You have to be able to be ultra reactive when this portal opens.
Yeah, and I wonder how much relationships start to come back into really mattering in college basketball. Because, like, you could talk to some first-year coaches. It's like, I kind of like this because it's like, you know, a 3-week deal. I meet the agent, I text the agent, have a couple Zooms with the kid, and then I'm able to potentially get him on board, like, if the money is right. But I think as, like, the money expands for these teams, the teams that have real relationships, both in the agency side, both internationally wise, and with, obviously, the players, those are going to be like the differentiators to me, I think, as like from the teams that are good at scouting the portal and the teams that are good at actually getting the guys out of the portal.
Can we just say something plainly, though? Like, the rules indicate that schools can't contact a player until they go into the portal. But this is like free agency in the NBA. It's happened. They might not. If I'm a coach and you're a player, I may not be able to call you directly until your name goes in the portal, but I can call your high school coach. I can call your agent. I can call your AAU coach. And by extension, you can get an idea of what I'm offering before you're on campus, before we even have a conversation. And if people don't think that is happening, not only before the portal opens, but during the course of the season, then they're just completely naive. That is the state of roster construction in college basketball. Now, just like always, you have the rules and you have people who decide the extent to which they are going to follow the rules. That's the reality. It has always been that way. Always been that way in college basketball. Different people follow the letter of the law to different degrees. That is what we are seeing right now. It's just a different set of rules. And so, without saying names, there's a number of players who went into the portal and committed less than 24 hours later. How did that happen? Because it was already done. It was already done because their representation, whether it was their agents, their coaches, their mentors, their guardians, whoever, had already had conversations with whether it was the coaches or representatives of those collectives. So it would be naive to think that those conversations and those negotiations don't happen before a player is in the portal. And that is all the more reason why you have to have additional people dedicated to roster construction, not just recruitment, but retention. You talked about relationships. The coaches have to develop relationships with those staff, but you have to be in constant maintenance mode. You know who I think does that? I'm going to give you 3 names. People who I think do that as well as anyone. Dan Hurley. You look at the amount of players he retained from this year's roster. Shaka Smart, who's said publicly that he's not paying some mid-major guy. He's also said he's not dealing with agents. He's just talking to kids. and Tom Izzo. When the amount of players that he's brought in back and gotten to buy into kind of that true team approach this year with no one scoring more than 13 points a game and then still making a deep run in the NCAA tournament, winning the Big Ten. Those are three guys who I think can still dig into that throwback mentality of leaning on their relationships.
I would throw Matt Painter into that mix as well.
That's very fair.
They do a really good job there at Purdue of being able to get their guys back.
Yep, that is very fair. All right, the discussion on positional talent is up next. We want to think about what positions are most important when you start to build your roster. And this is actually a question that I asked Will Wade just hours before he was introduced as the next head coach at NC State. Take a look.
When you approach roster construction, is there a first domino, whether it's an archetype or position, that you prioritize initially?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah. You're not winning the Kentucky Derby on a mule, so you better have the best bread you could. I think every coach is different. For us, you need a good point guard, and we've won with a lot of different point guards. But if you got a point guard, a scorer, and some sort of four-man, 1, 2, and a 4, if you got those three positions and those three guys are good players, can play professionally at some level, you've got a good team.
All right, Will Wade, the new head coach at NC State, talking about the positions and archetypes that he prioritizes most when it comes to building a roster. Of course, he is a new GM, and we know Andrew Slater's going to do an incredible job down there for the Wolfpack. Trotter, want to talk now about a Stockwatch. Want to look at the guys last year, and listen, I hesitate to say it like this, but we talk about history and the example it can provide. You alluded to that a little bit earlier. When we look back a year ago, and we think about players who were on the fence between going into the NBA and coming back to college basketball, I think we saw a lot of them, their stock didn't necessarily benefit from coming back to college basketball. Hunter Salas, I think, was in position to be a potential first-round pick a year ago. I don't think he's in that spot anymore. Nelly Davis, Alex Caravan, Coleman Hawkins, Mark Sears. I'm not sure any of those guys are going to be drafted higher this year than they would have last year. That doesn't mean they shouldn't have come back, because quite frankly, they all probably made more money this year in college basketball than they would have in the NBA. I want to be very clear about that. I'm not saying they made a mistake. I think in all of those guys probably made more money and so probably made the right choice by coming back. But when it comes to strictly NBA stock, the one name that pops into my head as a transfer who really helped themselves this year was Danny Wolf, and he didn't declare last year. I mean, he came and he played his way into a potential first-round pick this year at Michigan. But to me, the secret sauce is the second-year transfers. The guy, and I know this is something you've written about, the guys who transfer, get some comfort in year one, and then really take off in year 2 or year 3. Guys like Nick Clifford, guys like Janai Broom. So let's start talking about next year in college basketball. Who are those previous transfers who are now coming back to the same place, who have a chance to really help their NBA stock?
Yeah, the first one that I think about is Milos Uzan at Houston, right? Like, he is a potential second-round pick, I think, right now. Maybe he could play his way into a first-round pick, depending on how the pre-draft process goes. But the flaws that he fixed in his game at Houston, the more confidence that he was playing with, I just think about him next year. Like, he could be one of the best guards in America if he comes back to college basketball next season for a Houston team that I have number 1 in my preseason rankings. So I think could be the national championship, maybe favorite or a true contender. So Uzan would be the biggest name that I think of with that year 2 transfer jump. But yeah, like I wrote about before, like, getting a transfer for a year is great. But when you can keep them is that special thing. And I'd throw Walter Clayton into that mix as well. He was one of the great examples of that year 2 transfer jump as well. Chad Baker-Mazara at Auburn. But yeah, there's a lot of names when you kind of think about last year's class. Like, I think of, like, you know, a Kylan Boswell could potentially take another step in year 2 at Illinois. Like, JT Toppin, I think this year is going to be a guy that could take a massive year 2 jump with Texas Tech. So it's fun because I think that, like, when we kind of go through these portal things, it's like, oh, it's so fun to get that guy, but keeping him.
All right, so let's stay on that stock up, stock down theme. Let's talk about one. We're each going to pick a player, then we're each going to pick a team. The player is one that, by virtue of the fit, the new surroundings, we think is really going to help their stock next season. I'm going to go first.
Take it.
I'm going Bennett Sturts, and I know this is low hanging fruit, right? I mean, the guy already helped himself. He was phenomenal for Drake, phenomenal in the NCAA tournament. But remember, he started as a Division II player, and what he did last year at Drake was absolutely phenomenal. The shot making profile, along with the on-off ball versatility, being able to show he could run a team as well as be the primary scoring domino, I thought was absolutely fascinating. The extra year to develop his body. He's going to play for the same head coach. They're going together to Iowa. He will continue to be a focal point for that attack. And regardless of the fact that it is his third school in 3 years, it has all been under the same head coach. He's familiar with the system. I think he's going to be a star, and I think he's going to be in line to be a potential first-round draft pick a year from now.
No, I like that call. You know, I would give you a little bit of a hard time because Bennett Sturts transferring, right? Like he's just following his coach, right? Like, no, that's a great decision, right? Like there's not a big
and he gets
difference.
paid more everywhere he goes, so it really works out well.
I mean, but think about this: like 6'4", 180, like 190, like one of the best lead guards in college basketball is going to play for Iowa next year. Like that's a pretty cool story. What a terrific rise for Bennett Sturts, who, I mean, everything you hear about him is he's a great person as well. So he's due for a huge year, and he deserves every bit of it.
Give me your guy who you have potential stock riser for next year.
Yeah, I was looking at this more just like another favorite fit of mine. You know, I look at Keyshawn Hall. You know, there's a lot of questions about him. Like, does he impact winning? Like, can he buy in and buy a role? But, like, his ability to go and find the right fit for him at Auburn, I think has a chance to, you know, pay major dividends down the road. And again, this goes back to just like the transfer portal scouting, like my game plan of like, I'm going to prioritize coaches that have done it at a high level in the portal before. Auburn has certainly done that in the past, you know, and they just elevate different guys at a high level. You know, I think they're going to do the same with Keyshawn Murphy as well. But Keyshawn Hall, I think, is going to be terrific for Auburn this year. Mismatch hunting 4, can really handle it. Like, if I'm looking in the portal and scouting the portal, I want 4s that can pass, dribble, and shoot. I think that's the most valuable archetype to me, personally.
I'm taking whatever Will Wade said.
Auburn has it. Auburn has it. And Keyshawn Hall.
I agree with you. And I would even argue that I think he's got some jumbo wing potential down the road.
Absolutely.
When you see his ball skills. He can create. He's really smooth. He's actually got pretty good shooting splits as well. It's a little slower right now, but made 15 of his 29 open catch and shoot threes last year. That's over. I don't know that number is sustainable, but you know, you see all those different perimeter skill. For him, what's going to be interesting is the decision making. His turnovers exceeded his assists last year. I think he's going to rely. He had incredibly high usage. Can he be a little bit more efficient with potentially a little less usage? That is going to be interesting. All right, let's do a team now that we think is on the way up. And I've got a little bit of a different perspective on this. I think some of the teams that help themselves the most are the teams that not necessarily got the splashiest additions out of the portal, but the teams that got the best retention. And so you mentioned it earlier, Matt Painter and Purdue. I think when you talk about bringing Braden Smith back, along with Trey Kaufman-Renn, going to get a healthy Daniel Jacobson in the lineup as well. Those are 3 pieces which should put you at the top of the Big Ten again next season. Braden Smith, I believe, will be the most reliable point guard in college basketball next season if he wasn't already that this season. Total stat stuffer. He can beat you with his scoring. You take away his scoring, he can beat you with his decision-making. More than once, he's got 15 assists in a game. And for Matt Painter to bring in that, to retain that type of player for year 4 and have the level of continuity when continuity isn't really a thing anymore in college basketball, Matt Painter's got it. So by virtue of that, I've got Purdue as a stock rising team.
Purdue could head into next year thinking that they have the best point guard in college basketball and the best big man in college basketball. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
Bad.
All right, can I piggyback off that, though,
Please.
with my stock riser?
Please.
There are only 2 NCAA tournament teams that got their best 2 players back. Purdue is one. Oregon is the other one. They're a big stock riser for me as well. Jackson Shelstad is making his return. I love him. You know, just one of the best scoring guards in college
I love him, too.
basketball.
He just didn't have a great year.
Really? I thought he had a terrific year.
From an efficiency standpoint.
He had to learn a little bit of a different role, right, as like playing more of like a lead guard. And I kind of joked to somebody, he has like two like, you know, angels on his shoulder. And one of them is like, am I scoring or am I supposed to get everybody involved? But Shelstad, I think, could lead the Big Ten in scoring next year. And they also have Nate Biddle, potentially could also come back, a guy we've talked about a ton throughout the pre-draft process. He has his name in the draft right now, but he made an effort to say, if I come back to college, it will be to Oregon. he's not popped as a first-round pick. I think the money at Oregon that they could have for him to come back just makes a lot of sense for him to come back. So I think Oregon is set up to be very, very good next year because they also have KJ Evans back.
KJ Evans,
so like they've gotten their two best players, and the third guy who I think is just a terrific defensive piece as well, who could potentially be another breakout pick in his junior year. So I'm really bullish on Oregon, but I kind of feel like I say that about them like 2 or 3 times, year after year.
Yeah, I think that's part of the trap here is that by nature of the portal, we are more inclined to talk about the schools that are bringing in new players, bringing in new faces, but sometimes it's the ones that are retaining those players who are putting themselves in the best position to succeed. All right, this isn't necessarily going to be comfortable, but let's talk about stock down. Which fits don't you love? I'll start. It's my question. I'll lead with it. I worry about Mackenzie Mgbako at Texas A&M. I think that, listen, the talent is undeniable. Here's my thing with Mackenzie, and I've been saying this since high school. You're a 4. You are a 4. It's the same thing with Keshawn Hall. You might be a 3 eventually. You have that type of potential, but in order to be the best version of yourself, it's not about scheme, it's not about tempo, and I get it. You're going to play fast and get out in the open floor in this new spot, but at the 4, you've got a chance to be the best mismatch possible and have things become easier. We can see you've got shooting, you've got size, you've got all the tools, but give yourself the easiest matchup and don't get worried about positional labels. Nobody cares about that until you're productive. You've got to be productive first. And right now, productivity is going to be a byproduct of playing at the 4 and not worry about playing at the 3. So I've got that for stock down until he buys into that position. Which one do you have?
Yeah, for me, I was looking at Abdi Bashir, who transferred from Monmouth to Kansas State. And it's just, sometimes I think Bashir may check off some of the boxes that we've looked at with some transfer portal busts. Like he's 6'7", he's 160 pounds. The defense is a question. The playmaking is a question. The finishing at the rim is a question. He's got a strap, though. He is one of the best shooters in college basketball, and maybe he can be weaponized into that. But I just didn't understand it, maybe from Kansas State perspective, of running out Brendan Housen, who transferred to Iowa, who I think will have a really good fit there, who is kind of the similar type of player to Bashir, except I think Housen was a little bit cheaper, in my opinion. So it just didn't make sense from a GM roster building perspective, and Bashir, like the skill set there could be something that's a little bit scary, but it's undeniable. Like he could theoretically hit 80, 85, 93s next year. He had a game against Rutgers where he hit 10 threes, so you have to address that, but he also checks off some of the boxes that I look for potential bust candidates defensively and, playmaking and finishing at the rim, stuff like that.
All right, stock down, and I hesitate to do this because I think this guy is a phenomenal coach. I think he's a true gentleman. I don't love the Ryan Kalkbrenner succession plan at Creighton. Ryan Kalkbrenner was such a huge part of who Creighton was, not just defensive, certainly defensively, but also offensively. And I get it. Owen Freeman, he's coming in, you got a good player, but it's a different kind of player, and they're going to have to be a different type of defensive team. Offensively, they've got a lot of shooters. I highlighted Josh Dix as one of the players that I think has a terrific fit at Creighton. So I think they're going to be just fine defensively. What concerns me about this combination of players is a system that has been built around a drop coverage, rim protecting monster in Ryan Kalkbrenner, and not being able to find a player from the same archetype to replace him. So that is why I'm somewhat concerned. Mac is a heck of a coach. He brought Alan Huss back, and Alan Huss is a heck of a coach and really understands roster construction. So I'm not saying these guys aren't going to make the NCAA tournament. I think they will. I'm just saying it's going to be a different iteration of Creighton, and it might take some growing pains.
Yeah, I think this is a bet on player development.
Okay.
It has to be a player development, but yeah, I look at their roster and I don't see that quick twitch, super athletic wing that can really be an elite point of attack defender. I think Josh Dix is a good defender. I think Owen Freeman has to grow a lot defensively, especially with what he does. But
he ain't Ryan Kalkbrenner.
He's not Ryan Kalkbrenner. Very few are the king of verticality there. So I agree. I think that Creighton
throw
could
your hands in the air, wave them around like you just don't care.
And the thing is, it's going to be weird watching college basketball next year without him playing. Very weird. I feel like I've not seen a Creighton basketball game without.
He
Ryan
should
Kalkbrenner
put his name in the portal just for the heck of it. I digress. Your stock down team.
This is not again. I don't love doing this, but I don't look at Iowa State's roster and think that this is a group that's going to be a top 10 team in college basketball, and that's kind of the expectation that they've had under TJ Otzelberger, and they've done a terrific job of retaining Josh Jefferson, who had real offers from a lot of money-hungry teams that would have loved to take him, but he chose to stay, and Milan Momcilovic chose to stay, and Taman Lipsey is choosing to stay. Like, that's great, and retention is great, but their portal class, like, you're going to look through some of those guys, and there's a lot of question marks. This is another big, huge bet on player development and finding the right fit for these guys. And, can Eric Mulder become a Big 12 quality backup big man? Can Blake Buchanan, who I like on film, but can he take that next level? The transfer out of Virginia, Mason Williams, the transfer out of Eastern Washington. What are you getting out of him? So I feel like Iowa State might be a product of like the rosters right now, where there's $10 million rosters.
They don't have the buying power,
and they don't have the necessary money that other programs do that have been winning at the highest level of college basketball. And I think their roster shows that this year. So it's a good team, who I think is probably like a top 30 team nationally and will definitely make the NCAA tournament, assuming they don't have health. I just don't see them as that tier 1 national title contender that they were for the last couple seasons.
We've been going for the better part of 2 hours here. And if you have missed any part of this show, you can go back to the 24/7 Sports YouTube page and check it all out. You can watch the show in its entirety. There will also be breakdowns. You can also visit 247sports.com. And remember, that promo is still available. So you are going to want to use the code PORTAL, PORTAL, to get a definite discount. And remember, we got the contest too. So you're going to want to take that picture yourself watching YouTube, send it on in. All that stuff is going on and more. The portal will remain open until 11:59 p.m. local time tonight, which means players have until the end of the day in whatever time zone they are in to put their name in the portal. The subsequent recruitments and commitments will continue to be covered here on the 24/7 Sports channel as part of CBS Sports, both on 247sports.com as well as on the 24/7 Sports channel. For Isaac Trotter, I'm Adam Finkelstein. Special thanks to everybody behind the camera. We hope you've enjoyed this very special edition of the 24/7 Sports College Basketball Show.